The truth occurs.
Hi everyone. Well, it's been a while since I did a vlog about chemtrails, but a lot's been going on in that department, so I'd like to give you an update. Well, first of all, you may have seen the film, What in the World Are They Spraying? That was produced by Michael Murphy. Well, he's produced another film. It's called Why in the World Are They Spraying? And as the first one really gave all the documented evidence that geoengineering is being done and that it's modifying the soil and the water, that, you know, everything's full of aluminum, barium, and strontium. Well, the second film deals more with the agenda behind the chemtrail programming. What is the purpose of doing all this spraying? People speculate about a lot of things, you know, everything from damaging the crops and the environment, controlling the weather, to spraying people with swine flu or implanting them with nanotechnology. Well, the evidence really is for weather modification to make the planet actually less inhabitable, and for soil modification so that people really just won't be able to grow their own food, and all the control regarding agricultural crops will be concentrated in the hands of a few very large companies like Monsanto. You know, as they've proven, the soil is contaminated with aluminum, also barium and strontium. The aluminum in particular has the effect of raising the soil pH, so it becomes more alkaline. Which is not good when it comes to soil. It needs to be in a certain pH or things won't grow right. So if you tamper with that, then what you get is crop failures. As I said, it's changing the soil, and it's making it so that crops will not grow because the pH is too alkaline. And here is the huge smoking gun that this is being done intentionally as a program. And guess what? DuPont, Monsanto, they have patents on aluminum resistant seeds. And another thing is that the chemtrails, they're touted as, like, you know, saving us from, or that the geoengineering will one day save us from global warming, but they actually trap heat. They make holes in the ozone layer. They increase the radiation that reaches us, and they dry things out. So that they, like, divert the rain. So people are saying, how come they're not spraying in California? Well, they're not spraying right where you're living. They don't have to. They're spraying further out, all up and down the Pacific coast, interfering with the weather fronts that are coming in so they don't dump the weather on the crops in California. So anyhow, they're doing that. They're creating drought. And guess who's got drought-resistant GMO seeds? Yeah, Monsanto again, of course. And another thing is that with these crop failures, you know, people's farms are not producing, so then guess who buys the farm? Companies like Monsanto. And another big smoking gun is that people are actually trading weather on the stock market. Like, I don't understand how derivatives work. I've had this explained to me many times, but I just don't get it. All I know is that it's some kind of gambling where you're betting on stuff that doesn't exist. They can buy stocks for a certain crop, but they also have derivatives that they buy, like options on crop failures. They're doing that because they actually know what the weather is going to be. And then they make money when the crops fail because they've been chemtrailed. This all has a lot to do with Agenda 21, the Agenda for the 21st Century for Sustainable Development from the UN, which in fact is a program for population reduction and control. And as they modify the environment and people are not able to grow crops, they're forced to move into cities. The large corporations take control of all agriculture, and once the people are in the cities, it's easier to control them. It's easier to poison them with vaccines and fluoridate their water and implement birth control programs, or you know, even one-child policies, or really whatever they want to do. Having people in the cities is definitely good for the globalist elites who want to control absolutely everyone and everything. I kind of wish that there'd been a video like this around when I first approached certain people.
Oh, you mean because they spray, that's what makes the clouds?
Yeah. They spray in the sky.
Yeah,
and
look at the sky and you'll see.
Wow, so there's all kinds of chemtrails going on up there.
Yeah, those are
those are chem clouds.
Oh, those are chem clouds.
They're doing that.
It's like some kind of conspiracy or something like that.
It is a conspiracy.
Hmm.
I think that when it comes to things to truth people about, chemtrails is one of the most difficult topics. It's like they just can't hear it. They'll be like, that's water vapor, man. What are you talking about? And it can even be like the kind of topic that'll put a rift between you and your friends or you and your family. And it's something that, you know, a lot of the time I've just had to come to a point where I just shut my mouth around certain people because they just don't want to hear it, and the more you try to press the issue, you know, the more they just think you're nuts. So I highly recommend this film, Why in the World Are They Spraying, as a truthing tool, and also What in the World Are They Spraying. It's much more effective, I think, to give somebody a DVD or maybe trick them into watching it. Anybody who watches these films, you know, if they don't see the truth after that, then they must be some kind of, you know, brainwashed zombie ostrich who just doesn't want to see the truth. So you can see that the chemtrails are in no way a good thing. If somebody says, oh, it's going to help the environment in some way, or it's going to prevent something, or it's to protect us from radiation, or whatever, they don't know what they're talking about. The good news is that people are really waking up, and there is also a conference being held, Major Chemtruther Conference, August 17th, 2012, Consciousness Beyond Chemtrails. So that's coming up this weekend in LA. If you happen to be in LA, there's going to be a lot of really great speakers there, and Roseanne Barr will be there too, and they will be showing the premiere of Why in the World Are They Spraying. I think our best bet is really just to raise as much awareness as possible so that it becomes impossible for them to get away with this. They can only get away with it because people just don't know and they don't want to do anything about it. So keep fighting the good fight. Expose the chemtrails. So thanks for listening to me, and I'll see you next time. Oh, hi everyone. This is Truther Girl Sonia, and you're listening to the Truther Girls. The chat room is open. That is truthergirls.chatango.com, truthergirls.chatango.com, and hi to everyone in the chat room. And I see your comments, and thanks so much for joining me in there. You guys are awesome. So I'm happy to say now I will be talking to Michael Murphy, who's the producer of the film What in the World Are They Spraying, and now has produced a new film called Why in the World Are They Spraying, which addresses the likely agenda behind the chemtrail program. And the website is whyintheworldaretheyspraying.com, and I'll give you the link in the chat room. So welcome to the show, Michael.
Oh, good morning. Thanks for having me on. More importantly, thanks for covering this, Sonia. Good to hear your voice again.
Well, thanks, and so much for joining me. I'm happy to talk to you again. And I got to watch a screener copy of your film, and I got to say it's awesome. It's very well put together. The information in there is just so solid about what the chemtrails are. You have so much evidence that this is in place. I mean, how can it seems like Twilight Zone that people are still debating whether this is even going on.
Right. Well, for a long time, you know, the movement has not had solid evidence. I've been blessed enough to have been in contact with people that do have evidence. So, yeah, the people who have had a chance to see Why in the World Are They Spraying before our August 18th release really feel that this is going to revolutionize the movement, both the environmental movement. And the way that the film was designed, you know, was to educate those of us who are aware of this issue so that we can go out into the public and be effective activists, but also hit the mainstream. And we're very excited that this will be a tool for activism and again, think it's really going to revolutionize the movement with the info that we put in it. So, yeah, thanks for letting me share it with you. You're one of the few. We had a handful of people that we gave screeners out to, but again, the response has been just great.
Oh, I'm surprised that not more people are wanting to talk about this because it, like I said before, I mean, what's to deny? I guess they're worried about repercussions from even discussing this. But how come people like the geoengineer David Keith and them, they can go out and on the record lecturing at the McGill University and talking about geoengineering and how it's done and the benefits and all these things, and that's okay as long as at the end you put a disclaimer, but it's not really happening. That's all.
Well, that's right. And geoengineers now are they're selling this to the public, stating there are going to be a lot of consequences from our program. Some of those are perhaps 2 billion people would have their food disrupted. Drought is another consequence of geoengineering programs. We'll explain why in a little bit. Ozone depletion, I think I just mentioned that. We now have a huge ozone hole over the northern hemisphere, weather disruptions, really everything that's happening are consequences of geoengineering, but they're stating we may have to do this because there's this supposed threat of this global warming, and if they don't put these chemicals into our sky, everyone's going to die. So they're very open that there are going to be winners and losers under geoengineering. But what we found, and obviously through Why in the World Are They Spraying, this has nothing to do with mitigating global warming. Since we released the first film, we found numerous studies that now indicate aerosols being dispersed in our sky, as geoengineers are proposing and actually doing, regionally, they will create cooling. And if you've ever been outside and they start spraying, the temperature does drop. However, those aerosols actually act as a blanket. At night, they trap heat. And we've had an incredible increase in nighttime highs in the past 10 to 15 years when these programs have really been ramped up. So the question after the first film, and the first film was the first film that I did, and it was very effective in waking people up to what was being sprayed, aluminum, barium, strontium, and other toxins that were a threat to human health and ecology. But the question that many people were asking, and especially people that were skeptical, and people should be skeptical when new information is brought to them, the question was why. And looking into this, we put it all together, and that's why this is going to be such an effective tool for waking people up and getting ordinances passed and really moving closer to getting these programs stopped. That's really the end goal.
And it's a really big goal considering, who's backing this program. And I'm not trying to be discouraging or cynical here, but in the film you start to go into who's benefiting from this. And, we gotta try, like you say, you got to try to pass local ordinances and raise awareness about this. Maybe at some point they'll just have to, retreat, although I don't think that they would really ever admit what they were doing. It's just so huge. It's monstrous, It
is huge, but there's nothing more powerful than the spirit of truth. And when we awaken humanity, when we realize what's going on, which we'll dig into some of the real deep agendas, once people awaken, which they will, and we collectively stand up and say no, they will stop these programs. And we ended the film with a question, as you saw, why in the world are they spraying? And the answer to that was because we allow it. As human beings, we allow things to happen. And we're stewards of the planet, and now we're being called to take a stand. We're being called to wake up to what's going on. This, Sony, is their end game, as we'll discuss in the program today. There are many issues, many of which are of great importance, but this is the end game. These programs, as we'll talk about, is a way for certain individuals, certain entities to consolidate an enormous amount of monetary and political power into the hands of a few at the expense of everything. So if we go back to the primary ingredients that are being found now in rain from around the world, since we released the first film, people have been taking rain tests. Rain tests are very good indicators of atmospheric contamination, and people are finding the same chemtrail geoengineering footprint of aluminum, barium, and strontium in just very, very toxic levels. Of course, these are very toxic to both plant life and even human beings. A lot of people have been taking blood tests. They're finding the same chemtrail geoengineering footprint in their blood. We've seen a great increase in aluminum-related illnesses. Barium's very toxic. It lowers our immune system. So no question about it, our ecosystems are collapsing now around the world. Human health is deteriorating. There's no question that people are dying as a result of these programs. But the question remains why, and I can get into that if you'd like me to.
Of course.
Well, what we found, and if you go back, of course, geoengineers are proposing, denying that they're spraying this, but they're proposing spraying 10 to 20 million tons of toxic aluminum into our skies. And I think it's important to note what we're finding in the rain. It matches numerous geoengineering patents which have been designed to spray aluminum, barium, and other heavy metals. And it also matches what geoengineers deny they're going to spray but say they want to spray. And then what we see in the sky on a regular basis, we see these long trails which do not dissipate. They actually spread out and block the sun in the exact manner that geoengineers state that they want to do with their programs. And we've actually uncovered an issue called global dimming. Now we have literally less than 20% less sun hitting the Earth than we did just a few decades ago. And that's also an express goal of geoengineering. So the debate's really over. Without a doubt, it's happening. But the reason is why, and there are many different agendas associated with these programs. We focused on what appears to be the number one agenda, and that's weather control. And we interviewed many people. Mark McCandlish, he used to work in the defense industry. Scott Stevens, he was a weatherman for over 20 years, and started studying this. He noticed that the weather was getting very erratic. So he started asking questions, started putting time-lapse photography outside of his home, and he would review it when he got home after doing the evening news. And we used a lot of that footage in the film. But what he really noticed, about 500 to 700 miles ahead of a storm front, he would see this big canopy, planes going back and forth, laying these trails. And then within a day or two, these big storms would come in. A couple of reasons for that. If we look back to the primary ingredient of aluminum, of geoengineering programs, it's aluminum. And geoengineers say that's an effective toxin to put into our sky because it's really reflective. What we have found, aluminum is also a very effective conductor. So the science for manipulating our weather is very basic. What they will do, they'll put that canopy of conductor in the sky, and then through the HARP system or other technologies, they have the ability to literally heat that part of the atmosphere. Kind of like putting a cup of coffee in a microwave. If you shoot RF energy, it will heat up. And the heating atmosphere actually rises. And in that rising, it creates a low-pressure vacuum and enables these corporations to literally steer storms into certain regions, or in the case of this summer, here in the U.S., in many different areas, steering storms out of certain regions. I went to an aerosol research conference a little less than a year ago, and this is kind of what really kicked off the weather control investigation for me. And I spoke with a number of scientists, and I learned how aerosols affect the way that clouds condense and form and really affect the weather. And every scientist that I spoke with stated that geoengineering could be used to control and corporatize our weather. So what happens? Geoengineers are very open. I went back for this film. I looked at hours and hours of geoengineers talking about their programs, and they're very open that drought is one of the consequences associated with geoengineering programs. Guess what? We now have global drought. And our erratic weather, by the way, has been blamed for climate change. Many people are saying the erratic weather is due to global warming. For every degree that the planet heats up, we should expect 7% more precipitation. Guess what? Most of the world now is in global drought, so that would contradict that theory. But anyways, when the aerosols are sprayed into the sky, instead of the way the clouds form, when moisture gets into our atmosphere, they'll actually condense and combine. And when enough water molecules combine, it actually falls as rain. These aerosols act as what's called cloud condensation nuclei. So instead of the droplets combining, they actually adhere to these fine particulates of aluminum, barium, and they drift. They don't fall as rain. And that's one of the reasons why we have this heavy drought here in California. But after those particulates drift with the moisture over the continental divide, they eventually have to fall. And that's why we're seeing massive floods in the Midwest and the East Coast. This summer it's a little bit different, as we'll get into. There's without question the drought that we're having now here in the U.S. and in Canada and I believe other areas, without question is engineered. And I just got back from the Midwest, and rain would be predicted in the Chicago area where I was staying, and I would watch these beautiful thunderheads develop, and then I would see the airplanes, and I would see the aerosols above the clouds, and the clouds, instead of developing and falling rain, they would actually collapse. It would kind of look like smoke, and it would drift, and very little rain, if anything. So this, without question, the technology is there to create droughts, but who benefits from it? And that's one of the areas that obviously that you're aware of that we went into. There is billions of dollars that can be made through the use of weather control.
That's something that, you really go into in the film, what do you call it, disaster capitalism. So, and rather than just waiting for some disaster to happen and taking advantage of it, it seems that some corporations are, colluding to create the disaster and already have prepared what they're going to do for when it happens so they can really capitalize on it.
Oh, without question, yeah. Certain corporations are really raking it in. But it was interesting because, when I first heard about weather control, my question, I said, okay, the technology's there. Why would somebody want to control the weather? And we looked into it. At the very least, militaries have been interested in this because controlling the weather would give some sort of battlefield advantage. So weather control was used as early back as the Vietnam War, and the U.S. government actually flooded out the Ho Chi Minh Trail of the Vietnamese, and they blocked the supply line. So it was used as a weapon of war, and they really perfected it around that time. But after that, there was a treaty. It was called the NMOD Treaty, which was a treaty that essentially banned governments from using this type of technology during warfare applications. Well, we interviewed Dr. Nick Begich, which many people know. He's the author of Angels Don't Play This Harp, and he's considered to be a harp expert. He told us about a loophole within that treaty, and he stated that treaty's loophole is countries can use this technology over their own soil. So as Scott Stevens, the former weatherman, explained to us, and even Nick Begich, he stated that weather could be manipulated. You could affect, in terms of spraying aerosols, let's say, in the upper northwest of America, and literally affect weather systems several thousand miles away. So those treaties really shouldn't even be allowed because weather systems, as Nick described, they don't say, oh, wow, I'm here at the edge of the U.S. border, I can't go any further. No, they keep on going. And that's what we have. We have a situation where we literally have an entire planet which is under warfare, which is under attack. And as we'll get into, hopefully during this conversation, the corporations that benefit from this, they're literally making billions of dollars annually.
Yeah, well, when they have a treaty like that, and then they give exemptions, and the exemption could be like, well, so that someone could make artificial snow for a ski slope, or they could make rain in some places they had to. And I think I remember reading something like this that had to do, they have these loopholes, and they had one that had to do with biological and chemical weapons experiments or something like that too. And it said if it's done for peaceful or research purposes. Oh, we're going into a break. Well, okay, we're going to go into a break, and we'll be back in a moment. So stay tuned for more with me and Mike Murphy on The Truth Is Out. So welcome back, Michael.
Oh, thanks again for having me on. And if I could plug my website, it's whyintheworldAreTheySpraying.com. You can see the trailer there. And we're actually shipping next week. So our premiere is at the Consciousness Beyond Chemtrails event. That's in Los Angeles at the Ebell Theater. So you can find a link to that event. Which will be available live streaming again on the 18th. So we're expecting millions of people around the world to get an opportunity to see this.
Great. So what you were talking about in the film, well, actually also just now earlier about military applications, and this had been used in the Vietnam War, and that there was a treaty to end this, but that there are loopholes around it. And as you say, if you spray in one area and it could move over to another area. There's a document called Owning the Weather in 2025 where they talk about wanting to use weather modification in all forms for military strategy purposes all around the world. So I don't know how much they're really paying attention to that treaty. And when there was the Convention on Biodiversity, the UN Convention, which was, I think, last year, and they proposed a moratorium on geoengineering, the U.S. came back with a congressional report about how basically they were saying that there is geoengineering, but it's just never really been called that. That they have had various programs, and they just didn't name them as such. But that they think they should do more of it, and they should just call it that, and they should allot more funding to it. And the only question to them was, how do we get the rest of the world on board with it? That was what came out of that. And from a point of view of military strategy, it makes sense, but you'd think, yeah, but we're not in a war. I mean, is America in a war with its own people and with the entire world? Is this really America? I don't know if it's America, the country, doing it, or they just have the military force or the equipment to carry out a lot of this program. But I know it's not by any stretch the American people or their representative government or anything. I think it's these globalist elites who operate internationally, and so this is military strategy. And who is the enemy? Well, it's everybody, because as you go into the film and you talk about Agenda 21, which is right there on the internet on the UN's website. The goal is, of course, it's supposed to be for sustainable development, which is just, paying lip service and saying that you need to reduce the population. And this is what's going to be good for the planet. We're going to stick everybody in the cities. So not having them disrupt the land. We'll let the big corporations continue to exploit resources and pollute land, leave trails of destruction in their wake. But everybody, please stop having so many kids and come and move into the cities where we can control you better. I mean, take care of you better.
And Sonia, if you're not down with it, you are not green. If you want land and liberty, that is not green and that is not good. Yeah, they're using phony environmentalism, to get people off of their land, and there are so many implications, not only to our freedom but to the future of humanity. But if you look at weather control and how it relates to the issue of Agenda 21, if you remember the floods that were in the Midwest a little over a year ago, it was in May after the planting season, and a lot of farmers were wiped out. They had just planted their crops a couple weeks, maybe a month before. A couple of things happened in that situation, and I use this because it's a good example of how weather control can be used in certain applications. Some of the farmers were able to, some of the farmers were completely wiped out, and the ones that were had to sell their land. And a company owned by one of our favorite persons, George Soros, actually came in and bought that farmland for pennies on the dollar. That is an objective of Agenda 21, to get people off of their lands and, again, pack them into cities. So weather control can be used for that. The farmers that were able to stay above water and keep their land, they were forced, because they had already planted, to go into a late-season planting of genetically modified seeds owned by Monsanto and also owned by, what was the other company? DuPont. So, again, certain corporations completely benefit from these programs. But what really, shocked me before we get too much into the GMO agenda was the financial agenda and how you remember the financial part, correct, that we covered in Why in the World Are They Spraying?
Financial part?
Well, I'll kind of...
I probably do, but I'm just not sure which part you're referring to.
Right. Well, somebody told me.
You mean the investor who was talking about how you can make more money off this?
To make more money. And what shocked me, when we got into this investigation, somebody said weather's actually being traded on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. I said, you have to be kidding. This can't be. And they said, no. So I made a few phone calls, and I made contact with a trader in Chicago. So he told me about these weather derivatives, and we flew out there. And we interviewed him, and we learned about weather derivatives. And what essentially corporations will do, they'll purchase these derivatives to offset the risk on certain weather events. So let's say Michael, who we interviewed, used the example of a farmer or a seed company that has $5 million worth of seeds in the Midwest. What they will do is purchase weather derivatives to offset the risk. So let's say this summer we know that the food supply is completely being destroyed. Through the use of weather derivatives, people could invest in this. And let's say if they had, again, $5 million of seeds but invested in $10 million worth of weather derivatives, they make money when their crop fails. And that's exactly what's going on. Most people think the weather is completely unpredictable. And we obviously proved this technology exists and the fact that it's being used right now. So I'm not saying that everybody who's using these derivatives is involved with this insider trading, but without question, certain individuals have the playbook, and there are mechanisms, literally mechanisms, that you can make billions of dollars annually just on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. And Mike really painted the picture. He said, listen, every commodity is driven by weather. That is not disputed. So if you have some inside knowledge on what the weather will be, again, you can make billions of dollars. This summer, there is no question, this is an engineered drought. And we've looked on satellite out in the Pacific, because in California we haven't had too many visible trails this summer, nor do we typically in the summertime. And everybody said they quit spraying, we can rejoice. And I said, well, let's look at the satellite. And the satellite, there are trails literally from Hawaii all the way up to Alaska. And what they do, again, they spray those aerosols where the moisture should be forming. And the moisture, instead of building clouds, it stays onto the metal particulate, and it drifts, and it does not.
So they're
rain.
interrupting the weather cycle. So you're not going to get your rain in California, even if you don't see the chemtrails right over your head.
That's right. So they're holding this moisture in the air. It's not falling. As a result, we have worldwide drought. So, but again, there are corporations that are making literally billions of dollars from this drought. But I was shocked how deep the rabbit hole goes. It even goes deeper than just this monetary agenda. So it's a deep concern.
Yeah, I heard about this before. When they're derivatives, when they're the weather derivatives. I think I heard about this about a year before. Somebody had sent me documents that she had uncovered. I think I even had her on the radio. She had discovered that they were doing that. They were making bets on the weather, and so because they had knowledge in advance, then they could make money. When there was a crop failure, or when there was a disaster, because they would bet on they would invest in certain. It had something to do with insurance, or they would. I can't remember how it worked, but what you're talking about, and at the time I heard it, and I saw this. I looked at these documents. They were documents available to some of them were documents available to the public. It seemed like she had really found something, but it seemed so totally far out, but it obviously wasn't. And I had her on the radio so we could talk about this, but now you've gone further into researching this, and it's turning out it's really wide scale, and it's just like this big mafia operation where they know that they're going to burn down your house. So they'll come, and then they'll offer you insurance just before, or they'll make you, or no, that doesn't make sense. See, that's why I'm not in sales, in selling insurance. So they'll come over and they'll make you some kind of deal, or they'll do this or that or whatever, and they'll make bets, and then they'll come and burn your place down. Well, you know what I mean.
I get the concept. Yes, I grew up in the Chicago area, so we were no strangers to selling
you insurance before burning your store down is a bad idea. Clearly, I'm not in the mafia, but you know what I mean.
It's probably a bad idea, but without question, certain individuals and corporations, just from this drought alone, are making a ton of money. Food prices are expected to double. Corn is one of the major crops here in the U.S. Corn prices are expected to double. So those who invested in corn before this drought, and there were definitely people who had the inside, again, are making money. And it's a fleecing of America, because here in California, in the communities that I live, a lot of people live on a very, very tight budget. And, I've been asking some of my neighbors, what are you going to do when the food prices rise? They say, we simply don't know. Things are extremely tight. We don't know how we're going to pay rent at times. And when food prices double, and gasoline due to the corn prices rising, we're headed into a major food crisis here in America. One of the consequences, which I'll talk about, of geoengineering, again, droughts. Geoengineering, the proponents state our programs will create drought. Well, we're now in global drought. The trailer is wonderful. Why in the world are they spraying.com? You can see the trailer, find out more information about this film. We're going to be shipping out next week. But what really shocked me was, I think, what the end game to these programs are. And again, if you control the weather, you can control the entire planet, every food supply, and every political system. What we had found, we interviewed Barb Peterson of Farm Wars, and she's been investigating this for a long time, and she called me up and she said, you know what, I think I found a smoking gun patent for genetically modified seeds. So I spoke to her on the phone. We got in the airplane, we went out, and we interviewed her. And we know, again, from geoengineering, and I'll just give you a brief overview of the first film, after they spray the aluminum, barium, strontium, and other heavy metals into our sky, it falls down into our soil. And it literally not only changes the pH of our soil, which will kill a lot of plant life, but bioavailable aluminum, it's aluminum in its free form, is very toxic. And a lot of plants and a lot of trees will literally, they have mechanisms in their roots that will shut down when that's introduced into the soil. As a result, we see trees and crop loss everywhere. The forest is collapsing so quickly, and natural organic foods are collapsing so quickly. And we interviewed, as you remember, two farmers. One had seen a 60% decline in their ability to get yields over the past 10 years. Notice when they started spraying, that's when the changes occurred. The other farmer had seen a 70% decline in their ability to get yields. Geoengineering destroys crops in two different ways. The heavy metals that fall into the soil, again, is it sterilizing our soils, and then through the droughts and the flooding that we have, either too little moisture, too much moisture, that creates stress in the soil. What Barbara had brought to our attention and what we reviewed in the film, Monsanto has a new genetically modified seed that addresses abiotic stress. What is abiotic stress? Again, it's everything that the chemtrail geoengineering programs create. Heavy metal contamination, droughts, there are drought-resistant seeds, too much moisture, overgrowth of fungus. Geoengineering creates fungal overgrowth because it blocks our sun, and the fungus is now thriving and killing plant life. So again, through the destruction of our farms, and smaller farmers, organic farmers now are not able to get their yields, so they have two choices. They can either give up their land and move into the city, or they can move into these new stress-resistant, abiotic stress-resistant, genetically modified seeds. Sonia, what this is, it is a corporate takeover of natural systems. And I'll explain why. When I stay out in Hawaii, I'm blessed to stay on an organic farm, and I usually go between films and between activism, and we live a very organic life. We're dependent on natural seeds, sunshine, and rain. But that is changing now because that's being corporatized and controlled. And what I noticed, the way that the Earth was initially developed, we were meant to live off of the Earth and off of nature. Well, through death and destruction created by geoengineering programs and the weather control, these corporations are literally usurping the authority of nature and or the authority of God and bringing it under corporate authority so that these entities can have godlike power. Geoengineer David Keith made a statement several years ago. He said geoengineering gives man godlike power. These people are playing God. They're saying...
They definitely are. Michael, we're going into a break, but stay tuned, everyone. I'll be back with Michael Murphy in a moment. And today I'm speaking with Michael Murphy, producer of What in the World Are They Spraying? Chemtrail documentary, and now the follow-up film, Why in the World Are They Spraying? So welcome back, Michael.
Thank you for having me on again. It's a very important issue.
Well, thank you for coming on with me. So we were talking about how they can control the crops, and basically this is like the ultimate plan. Like you say, you know, this is the end game here, because if people say, well, what if the financial system collapses and we don't have any money? Well, your financial system collapses, but if you're self-sufficient and you have some seeds, you can grow your food, you're not going to starve, you can trade things, life will not, you know, come to a screeching halt. But if they can control the weather to the point where they make it impossible for you to grow your own food, that's a lot more serious than any financial collapse, because countries have recovered from financial collapse. But if they make it so that the only people who can produce any agricultural crops are Monsanto and DuPont, well, yeah, that's a lot worse.
That's right. And if you look at historically, even during the Great Depression, I think most Americans did have the ability to grow their food. Now in this season, most Americans and most people around the world are dependent on some type of corporate food supply. And if you look at organic people that grow their own food, we have this system, this corporate governmental conglomerate. I call it the beast, and it wants to control everything. It wants this godlike power. It's something that's been spoken about in the prophecies in most major religions, and we see it coming to fruition. So again, if you control the weather, you can control literally the planet. So those who are dependent on nature, on God, who can work with natural seeds, natural sunlight, this corporate system does not gain power from them. So in essence, people that live like that, we are the enemies, and that's what the attack is on. So we're coming into a season, if we allow this to continue, that we will not have the ability to grow anything without these genetically modified seeds. And what we came across, and we put a suggestion, we didn't focus too much in why in the world are they spraying. There's a company called Arbigen. Arbigen is genetically modifying forests. So again, this is an agenda to literally, and as sci-fi as it sounds, to genetically modify the entire world. And in doing so, there's this shift of power. It's this shift of the power of nature, the power of God, into the corporate power that is controlled by these other individuals.
Hey, we've come a long way from the days when people even couldn't conceive of the idea of owning land. And now it's like somebody owns the weather and owns all the crops, owns the seed itself that you can't just plant because they have a patent on the seed. They're going to have a patent on the trees, too. I actually wonder, well, someone here in the chat room is asking, is there a way to heal the soil? I was wondering that, too, if it's becoming too alkaline, is there something you can do to make it more acidic? And the other thing was, you see crops now becoming resistant to the pesticides and things like that are used for the GM, like the Roundup that's used for the Roundup Ready corn, and you get these super weeds. Is it possible for plants to also adapt to the changing soil conditions, or no?
I've spoken to a lot of scientists, and Francis Mangels, who was in the first film, and also in Why in the World Are They Spraying? He said he simply does not know. I believe that nature has a solution to every problem when things are introduced, but it takes time. So I think what really needs to happen, the spraying definitely needs to stop. Our ozone is being destroyed so quickly. Every time they spray, it does shred our ozone more and more. Many people are realizing, including me, when I go out in the sun now, I burn very quickly. I used to be able to stay out in the sun for 5 or 6 hours, now 45 minutes, and I need to come back in. That is
me too, yeah.
Yeah,
that happened to me last summer because I always say, I never burn. I got Mediterranean blood. And then I went out to a parade, and I was only out like 45 minutes, and I had a burn on my shoulders. That was the first time I had a burn, and I don't even remember the last time I had a burn.
That is a result of geoengineering. They are literally destroying our protective layer. And it's all about money and power. It's all about greed. So aren't you happy that we have all of these consequences? So certain individuals can have this power. And one person, and I think we spoke last time I was on, it was about a year ago, our favorite person, Bill Gates, who is such a philanthropist and so into helping the world, is investing a lot of money into geoengineering research, which obviously destroys soils and organic farmers' ability to grow organic foods. But guess what? He's coming to the rescue again, Sonia.
Yes? Oh, good.
Yeah, he's invested his money in Monsanto. So Bill Gates is helping the problem that he's creating.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
So going to help, so they can develop crops that are resistant to all this damage that they're doing in the first place. And then maybe after that, when we're all starving and our water's polluted and it's a third world country, maybe he'll give us some free vaccines then just to finish the job.
Well, I'll definitely be in that line. You can definitely count on me because he is such a wonderful person for geoengineering, genetically modifying the world, Yeah, it's a deep
I'll be in that line, too, right behind you, Mike.
And we'll be passing out flyers encouraging people to get out of that line. And that's what we need to do. We need to wake people up. And when people hear that Bill Gates is involved with this, because I hand out free DVDs constantly. I'm always out in my community, and I want to point out my films are available for free. We encourage people who purchase a DVD to make copies and hand out for free. So whyintheworldaretheyspraying.com. We're shipping next week. But it's important to get out into our community because people are not aware of what's going on. And once they become aware, a collective, conscious community can take action. And Maui was an area that we started focusing on about a year and a half ago. So we held screenings of the first film. We hit the street, handed out literally thousands of free DVDs of What in the World Are They Spraying? And because it's a small area, we got critical mass. And once we had the public awareness, we met with the mayor's office, and we said, we want to start an ordinance to ban geoengineering. And they said, well, what is that? We said, well, chemtrail issue. And they said, oh, no, we don't want to deal with that conspiracy stuff.
Oh, no.
Initially, but we got, we said, listen, we're going to bring you documentation. So we went in there, we spoke to them, and we showed them the Royal Society report and handed them a copy of the first film. And because of that, they became concerned about this. And we birthed what's called the Clean Sky Ordinance, and it's an ordinance that will ban geoengineering programs without two things, an environmental impact statement and informed consent, which they will never get. So it's a step in the right direction. Sonia, yeah. I'm not naive enough to think the geoengineers are going, oh, no, we can't spray above Maui. They're moving forward with this, but it does a couple of things. It's
a good start. Yeah, and I'd like to add that, I have this one person in particular who I really wanted him to understand what I was talking about with the chemtrails because I was so disturbed about it. And because he thinks I'm crazy, So I tried to tell him, and I was like, yeah, man. And I could just hear how he must have heard my voice. Yeah, man, I got these documents, man. I read it on the Internet. It's from the government and the military and stuff, man. You got to check it out. And he just was like, you have no evidence. I don't even want to see it. He wouldn't even look, and he just, he did the buzzer went flashing, cuckoo, cuckoo. So we couldn't talk about it anymore. But don't let that happen to you. Instead of trying to truth somebody in a vague way like I did, show them what in the world are they spraying. It's free on YouTube, or better yet, even show them why in the world are they spraying, because it's so solid. Nobody could look at that and be like, yeah, but there's no proof, because there is. It's right there.
Yeah, the next film, when I started this, I said this will be a supplementary film. I still want to lead with the first film. But then after showing this to people said, no, you have to lead with this. They said this film they said the first film was great. They said this is, 5 times better. They said this will be the film that creates a revolution here in America. And I feel very, very strongly about that. And I don't even enjoy making films, but they can be a very effective tool for activism. And we have one goal, and that is to get these programs stopped. And after looking at this, everyone is talking about the weather right now. And we started a little less than a year ago on the film. And what's amazing, everything that we spoke about in terms of connections between geoengineering is happening right now with the food crisis, with the drought. And weather is something that everyone can relate to. This is the tool that we need to use. The first film was put in the hands of every member of our Senate and Congress. Of course, most of them, if not all, are completely bought and paid for. But I have state senators now that are contacting me asking for some guidance to initiate some ordinances in their state. So again, this is something that we encourage people to go out, hand out. It's a great way to wake your community up. In my community, because I walk out with DVDs just about every day, and when they spray or when the weather is too hot, it's a very effective way to say, hey.
Great. It's great. I'm sorry, Michael, but we're really at the end of the hour. Thank you so much for coming on. Everybody, please check out Why in the World Are They Spraying? And next week I'll be speaking to Ann Diamond, who was a victim of the mind control experiments right here at the Allen Memorial Hospital in Montreal. So thanks for listening, everyone. Thank you, Mike, and have a great weekend, and I'll see you next time.